Welcome everybody to today's resume review session. I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Hardy from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. She's here with us today and is going to give us a nice presentation on how to put together the perfect resume and get yourself out there so that employers can find you easily. I wanted to start off with a thank you. Let me go to my next slide here. A thank you to Enterprise for working with us through this. Enterprise has a great management training program for both internships and full-time, and you can get more information on that by visiting the Enactus Career Marketplace. And the link is there on your page, enactusunitedstates.org/career_marketplace. We also have other opportunities for you to meet and network with both alumni as well as interested employers. You can find that information, whether it be contact information, upcoming events, job listings, all that information on the career services page at enactusunitedstates.org. So with that being said, I wanted to say another thank you to Elizabeth. You guys have been great. You are great. You're going to be great. And I wanted to pass it over to you so that you can get started on your message. And maybe I'll kind of throw in a couple comments here and there if I really like it and I'm getting hyped up for what you're saying. Career education is my absolute favorite. So I love hearing about this stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me today. Welcome to everyone that is viewing. I've been lucky enough to partner with Enactus over the years at some of our local schools, and it's a fantastic program. Y'all are definitely very smart, and I would definitely recommend my first tip for your resume is make sure Enactus is on it. So as Ray mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Hardesty. I'm Talent Acquisition Manager for Enterprise Holdings. I've been with the company actually for 20 years. I started with Enterprise in our management training program right out of college, progressed into management. I moved into the recruiting hiring side of the business in HR. So I've been in talent acquisition for most of my career with Enterprise. I hire for our management training program, our internships and other positions, which means I have looked at a lot of resumes over the years. Good ones, bad ones, interesting ones. So hopefully you'll get something out of this today. Even if it's just one or two things, it really can make a difference to your resume, remembering that it's not going to get you the job, but it's definitely going to get you the interview so that you can sell yourself and actually get the job.
And Elizabeth, what would you say, how many resumes do you typically look at in a week or in a fall semester?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. It's just after 10 o'clock today on a Tuesday. So the last 2 days I've looked at probably about 20 resumes. This afternoon I have a virtual career fair, so I'll be looking at probably another 50 resumes just this afternoon. So
and they all start to blend together, don't they?
They do. They do.
Yeah.
So kind of what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about what a resume actually is, the content areas of a resume. I'll give you some tips as well as some resources so that you can do some homework after this. So really, what is a resume? It's the most important tool you have to start your career. How many pages should it be? And my recommendation is I just mentioned how many resumes that I look at. 1 page is sufficient, especially if you're in college or recently graduating from college. You don't need to go more than 1 page. Now, if I'm talking to people that have been out in the workforce for 10, 15, 20 years, all right, maybe you have enough experience to warrant 2. You guys don't yet, so keep it to 1. Keep it to 1 page. And remember that this is going to be what gets you the interview so that you can actually get the job. And during the interview, they're going to ask you things from your resume, so we'll talk a little bit about that later too. Here's an example of a nice, easy to read resume. Simple with your name, your address, objective if you have one. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Your education, since you are still in school or you're recently graduating, your education should be at the top of your resume. Then it'll go into work experience, leadership ability, honors activities. Nice, simple, easy to read. This is not the chance for you to really kind of wow someone with your creativity or your graphics or anything like that. Unless maybe you're a graphic design major, then maybe you probably want to get one of your professors to take a look at it. But for most of us, you want to keep it simple and easy to read. White or off-white paper. You don't want to do your Elwood's pink, smelly resume from Legally Blonde. Keep it nice and simple. Use a font size that people can read. When people hear one page, they think, oh my gosh, I got to make the font really small so I can cram everything in. That's not what I mean about keeping it to one page. A lot of us are older and we have weak eyes and glasses, and we need to make sure we can see it and read it. Keep it non-decorative typefaces, easy ones, Times New Roman. Arial are your nice basic ones that you can read. Stick with one typeface. Don't do different ones. Avoid italicy script. And it says underline words. I'm okay with bolding some things. I'm okay with maybe a few underline words, but don't go crazy with it. Don't use acronyms or abbreviations. This happens a lot on resumes. I know what some are. I do not know what all of them are. So you want to make sure that you spell things out. If you want to put the acronym or abbreviation in parentheses in case you need to refer to it later, I'm okay with that. Presenting information in reverse chronological order. So start with the most recent first and then work your way back down. Choosing a pattern and sticking with it. Pretty simple. Don't use horizontal, vertical lines, graphics, pictures, shading. I mentioned before we don't need pictures on it. A lot of big companies are going to use artificial intelligence to look at resumes and read resumes. So they go through scanning things, and if you have crazy things on your resume, it's going to trip up the technology. So that's another reason to keep it simple. Don't fold or staple it. And I don't know if anyone still mails a resume, but if you do, put it in a large envelope.
Yeah, and I would talk a little bit just about the formatting. There's so much that you can do with formatting, but I agree with you 100%. It needs to be consistent formatting. And just because we're telling you to keep it to one page, that doesn't mean that you can't get all of your information in there. There are ways to do that, and I think we'll probably see a few ways of doing that as we go through. But you're right. I mean, we've been looking at a lot of resumes, and nobody's mailing them anymore. They're all, and I don't know if you touch on this in the future. I should know this, but I think it's important when you do email a resume that you email it in a PDF format. Do you touch on that later?
Yeah, but okay. Certainly it's important to bring it up a couple different times.
We'll talk about it
more. PDF, and even having a PDF and having a Word too. Sometimes people email two different versions of it as well.
And here's why you don't want to email your version in an editable format like Word or any other, even Google Docs or whatever, because somebody can change your resume and make it say what it doesn't say, and B, the formatting itself can be thrown off by different versions of the program. So if I have an earlier version of Word, all of a sudden your beautiful resume that you formatted is all shuffled up because the formatting's different in different versions. If you convert it to a PDF document, it holds that format and gets rid of any editability, if that's even a word. I think it's a word. I'm going to look it up while you're talking.
And I think another nice thing to do is if you are going to a formal interview, and it is in person, I remember back when all interviews used to be in person, if you want to bring a copy of your resume so that way it looks the way you want it to, bring a copy of your resume, have a nice padfolio like this. If you're going to a career fair, maybe one day we'll be going to career fairs again. And that way it looks the way you want it to. So I have no problem with somebody actually presenting me with a resume. In fact, it's nice and it looks exactly the way you want it to if you're going into the interview.
Yeah.
Jumping into what the resume structure should be, it starts with personal information. And before you think, of course I should have my contact information on a resume, I've seen many resumes that have not had someone's name on it. not had their phone number, not had an email address. It sounds silly, and obviously no one's intentionally not putting their name on their resume, but it does happen. So make sure your contact information goes at the top of your resume. Be sure to include a phone number that you're going to answer, as well as an email that you're going to check. You want the recruiter to be able to get in touch with you after they see their resume. And if you're not checking your voicemail, and if you're not checking your email and your spam, you're never going to know if they're contacting you back. So make sure that the information you're using is what you are checking daily. Don't use nicknames. Use a professional, neutral email address. If you have a different school address to your home address and you want to include both of them, you can. If you're not typically concerned about location, it doesn't matter where you work. You don't even necessarily have to have a full address on there nowadays. Some people just put the city and state. Some people won't put an address for privacy reasons. So times have definitely been evolving there. But again, your phone number and your email address should be on there. If you're listing your cell phone, which I'm assuming nowadays everybody is, make sure you have a professional greeting on your cell phone. Again, keeping in mind you want employers to be calling you. So make sure you know what they're hearing when they do call you. This is an important thing too, is make sure that your voicemail isn't full. I know nowadays nobody checks voicemails. No one listens to voicemails. My kids, if I leave them a voicemail, they've never heard one. So your mailbox does tend to fill up. Recruiters will probably be leaving you messages, and if they can't leave you a message, that can be a deterrent. They'll move on to the next person. So be cognizant.
That can be very, very frustrating. Very frustrating.
Very frustrating. Don't include any personal statistics either. I don't care how old you are, how much you weigh, if you're married or not, or any pictures. I know that's very European to put a picture on it, but don't. So objective, that's kind of a controversial thing. Do you have an objective? Do you not have an objective? The answer is there's no right answer, but there is a wrong objective to have, and that is one that limits you in terms of who you're giving your resume to. If you're giving your resume to one specific employer and no other employer is seeing that resume, then you want to tailor it to that position and that employer. If you're posting your resume on a LinkedIn or on an Indeed where multiple employers are going to be looking at it, then you probably want to keep it a little bit more general in terms of the type of position that you are seeking, or the type of an organization and work environment. You don't want to have your resume or your objectives screen you out of a job if you don't want to be screened out of that job. So be very cognizant of it.
I've seen a lot of people trip up with that objective so many times. They want to go to work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and they end up saying, I'd love to get a job with Budget Rent-A-Car, or, because they just sent that resume to another company.
Yep.
And it automatically, the recruiter said, well, if you want to go work for that company, go ahead. And they move right on to the next candidate. So
they do.
Very,
I see
very
that a lot with types of jobs too. I'm looking for a position in accounting, but yet you're applying to a sales position.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably want to have multiple resumes, and you probably want to really double check who's getting which one.
Yep.
Your education should be next after your contact information. What you should include, your degree that you're attaining, your major, minors, or concentrations. Obviously, where you went to school is important. Your graduation date, you can even put, expected May 2021. Make sure that it's clear. You don't have to put a GPA on there, but if it's a good GPA, it's 3.0 or above, or 3.5, 3.75, then brag about yourself. Put that GPA on there. If you're say, take accounting, for example, maybe your overall GPA isn't as strong, but your accounting GPA really is, and you're applying to accounting positions. I've seen where people put their major GPA and what that is. If I'm hiring for accountants, I don't really care what you got in Greek mythology as much as I care about what you got in your accounting classes. So that's something else that you can look at. Mm-hmm. And any academic honors that you have, like Dean's List or anything like that, you want to make sure you include on there. Don't put anything high school related on there. I will say one exception to that is if you're in your, first or second year of college, and maybe you were like the valedictorian of your class. I'd put that on there. That's something to be proud of. But if you're a junior or senior or recently graduating, you don't want to put high school information on there. And don't list the classes that you're taking, especially if they're relating to your major. If you were a business major, I know that you took accounting, finance, marketing, management. You still take those classes now. As a marketing major, I still took those classes 20 years ago, so you don't need to indicate them.
And as
Again,
recruiters, we can find that on your transcripts, right? So
absolutely.
yeah.
The only exception that I would say to that is, say you had an English major, but you were applying to more business related positions. You found out halfway through school, you don't want to be in English, you do want to be in sales or marketing or management. So maybe you took some business classes that I wouldn't necessarily know that you took as an English major. Those you could possibly include, but only, again, if it's unrelated to your major and it's related to the position that you're applying to.
Good advice.
Work experience. That should typically come next. You want to title the organization, the position that you worked at, the location of that, the dates of employment. Some people will just put the year on there. I recommend putting the month and year, because some, especially in college, some positions are pretty short. And if you put 2019 to 2019, it looks weird. But if you put January 2019 to December 2019, then I see, oh, that was a full year. Description of experiences with emphasis is on skills and achievements. That's really important right there. For example, say you were a server at a restaurant. I've been to a few restaurants in my day. I know what servers do. I don't need you to describe the job to me. But what you can do is what specific skills you learned as a server. What achievements did you have? Did you win any competitions? What was your average tip size compared to your check? Are you good at upselling? Were you an employee of the month? What does that look like? So it's putting the specific skills and achievements under your work experience really do pop. Again, you don't have to just describe what the job was necessarily.
Yeah, and I want to add to this, because I think work experience is often one of the things that people fuss over in their minds so much. Should I put this job on there? Should I not? I already have 3 listed, but I've worked a couple others. Again, you want to go in chronological order, like you're talking about, reverse chronological order, but you also want to say, like you said, I was a server for a year at a restaurant. Well, you know what that is. If you have other jobs that more closely align to what you're going for, but you still want to put that server job on there, you can do that without putting bullet points. You can just say, hey, I also work these 3 jobs. What that tells me as a recruiter is that you know how to have a job, and that's almost as important at this stage in the game as anything, right? I'm going to show up to work on time. I'm going to be able to manage a check, a paycheck. I'm going to be able to work within an office environment. Those types of things can really be shown just by saying, hey, I've had these jobs before. I've seen some resumes with just academic all the way down, and I wonder sometimes, is that person, do they know how to have a job? And that's a skill in and of itself.
Absolutely. I think another thing to recognize, especially when you're in college, is, have you been asked back to jobs over the summer? So, I did this summer of 2018, 2019. It also would show, oh, wow, you must have done a good job. They wanted you back. So don't discount some of those summer positions either.
Yep. Lifeguards, camp.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But keeping in mind that if it's on your resume, especially when it comes to work experience, they might ask you about it in an interview. So if you don't want them to ask you about an experience or something like that, and you don't want that to be a topic of conversation, you might not want to include much about it on your resume. Yeah. And the other thing is too, using action words to describe your job duties as well. Those things pop just like numbers do. These are just some examples of some specific skills that you may want to include. However, when I'm looking at a resume, you can tell me that you've got great communication skills, leadership ability, but what I'm going to want to see is, great, you can say you have leadership ability, but where was that leadership ability? And that should be actually on your resume. Computer skills in this day and age, if you don't know how to use Word and Excel, I'm not entirely sure you actually went to college, but if you have different types of computer skills, things that maybe aren't as obvious, certainly include those too.
Yes.
Here, if you want to just snap a picture of that, those are some good words to use on a resume too. You can also Google good resume words. Highly recommend a lot of these. I really like some of them. And then additional experiences. All of your experiences are not just going to be work. They're going to be clubs, sports, organizations, things like Enactus. You want to make sure that you include them on your resume. Show that you're a leader. If you are an underclassman and you haven't had a leadership role in a club or an organization or fraternity or something like that, you've still got time. Take on a leadership role. It's really, again, going to pop on your resume. You don't need to put leadership ability on there because I'm going to see, oh, you were the president of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Fraternities and sororities, I think, sometimes get a bad rap, and I've seen people debate whether they put it on a resume or not. If it's something you want to talk about, you had excellent recruitment, you were philanthropic, you did fundraisers, you held a leadership role, you were on an exec council, those are things you're going to want to put on there. If you were in a fraternity or sorority and you went to parties and that was it, maybe you don't want to include that as much.
Now, I will say that it's so important what you said there is to take a leadership role, because the reality is I can go out and join as many clubs as I want. I can go out and join NABA and Alpha and Beta Alpha Psi and AK Psi and all these different organizations and Enactus. And if I'm not taking a leadership role, well, then you're just a member. And look, membership is great, but if you're putting it on your resume, you want to show why you joined that organization, why it was important to you, and what kind of leadership role you took. If we can't see that you've taken a leadership role, then we can say, well, great. You can, like I said, you know how to join something.
Yeah.
Good on you. You need to take a leadership role and you need to show what you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then if you have any community involvement that you've been a part of, those are also things you can highlight again. And of course, I would hope it would go without saying, if you have any military experience, that should definitely be on your resume. ROTC, National Guard, maybe you came back to college, you're part of the military. Definitely include that. Honors and awards. Absolutely. As I mentioned before, things like Dean's List, scholarships, honor societies. If you're able to put in there, if you are part of an honor society, what it took to get into that honor society is important, or be, again, prepared to talk about it. Everyone knows what a Dean's List is, but some of these other ones, especially if they're school specific, other people might not know. So making sure you list those achievements is important. Any other professional skills that haven't come up in other ways on your resume? If you speak different languages, we talked a little bit about computer skills, any special skills or training that you may have received, whether it be in school or out of school, again, that would be relevant to the position that you're applying to or interviewing for. I'm going to say that again. If it's on your resume and it's not relevant to the position, you don't have to include everything on every resume, so making sure that it's applicable, but make sure you have room for those professional skills.
And I would say with regard to the skills, especially languages and computer skills, if you're not fully proficient in them, then you need to put either beginner or intermediate or something like that. Because if you tell me you speak French on your resume, I'm going to assume that you are proficient and fluent in French, unless you tell me otherwise, right? So I see that a lot of times with IT resumes or information systems where they say, well, I've got experience with Python, I've got experience with all these, C++ and all these other languages. And I'm like, okay, well, how proficient are you with Python? Well, I took an intermediate, or I took a basic class in it. Okay, that's very different than saying, I'm proficient with Excel. Well, do you know pivot tables? Do you know VLOOKUPs? Do you know all these, fancy things that are in there? Because if not, then you're not proficient with it. And you need to be real with yourself and real with the employer about that. So.
Absolutely. There's nothing more uncomfortable in an interview when somebody asks you about something on your resume, like, proficiency in a language or whatnot, and they start talking to you about that and you're like, I don't know what they're talking about. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for the recruiter, and it's probably
No,
not going to get you the
no.
job.
Here's a fun one. Okay, I know I don't want to go long, but at the same time, this is a fun story. So I was interviewing a young lady one time who had on her resume, this was for an accounting position, had on her resume that she processed payroll for a company that she had worked for in the past. And when we started to go into it a little bit, I said, "Oh, tell me a little bit of, how did you go about processing the payroll and what was that all about?" It boiled down to her idea of processing payroll was pushing the cart around on Friday and handing out checks. So do you see the difference between processing payroll and going through the taxes and going through the benefits, withdrawals and all that kind of stuff versus handing out a paycheck that's already been done, right? You're not processing payroll.
No.
You're
And it
not.
doesn't probably matter how great maybe some of her other answers were, experiences were.
She
That's the
was
one you remember.
she was dead at that point. Her candidacy was gone because she misrepresented herself in her resume and the way she talked about it. So you already mentioned this, and I know you'll probably say it again, but the resume is it's a conversation starter. Everything on there is something to say, "Oh, you did that. Tell me more about this, and how can that relate to what we're looking to do?"
Mhm.
Anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely. And then the last thing, and this shouldn't be on your resume, this should be a separate page, are references. You can put references offered if necessary, something like that, or additional references on your bottom of your resume. It's not necessary. If I'm interviewing you and I'm asking you for references, I'm pretty sure you're going to give them to me if you want the job.
Hmm.
So that's just needless space on your resume, but definitely have it prepared. Make sure that the person that you're using as a reference knows that you're using them as a reference. And be sure to include their information actually on there too, so they can get in touch with them, whether it be via email or via phone as well. And you should, I think, have professional references. Maybe it's a previous employer. It could be a professor. Maybe it's an advisor for Enactus because you're super involved. But those are the types of people you want to use as references. Not necessarily a family friend that has a really impressive job but doesn't know anything about you personally and your experiences. You want people that actually know you and can sell you. Additional resume tips: proofread, 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 and then have somebody else proofread, 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 and then have somebody else proofread, proofread, proofread. I can't say that enough. Have multiple people reading your resume. Yourself, your roommate, maybe a professor, have them look at it. Your career center, have them look at it. There are so many people out there that would love to look at your resume. And I am the first one to tell you, I was not an English major. I can't spell check is like the greatest thing that ever happened to me. So I will proofread things for people, but I am not the expert. So you need to have so many other people look at it. I always had my go-to person in the office, and when I was sending out an email that was really important or that multiple people were going to look at and read, I had him look at it. He was my proofreader. So have that person in your repertoire, making sure that they're looking at it, because spell check can also get you into trouble too if it spell checks the word the wrong way.
Well, each one of these schools has a fantastic career center,
Oh,
right? So, and they are your first line of defense. But by all means, if you're watching this, most likely you're an Enactus student as well, and we're here for you. So that's part of what our network of partners are willing to do for you. So we've got plenty of people from Enterprise, from a bunch of other of our partners who are more than willing to take a look at your resume and give you advice on it, give you critiques on it. So take advantage of those opportunities, and those it creates networking opportunities as well.
absolutely. And especially right now, career centers are working just as hard remotely as they were when you can actually go into the office. It's actually easier for you guys as students. So don't just think because you're not on campus that you don't have these services available, because you absolutely do. That does it for me in terms of overall presentations. This is normally when I like to get questions. So if you do have questions, you're always more than welcome to certainly reach out to me or certainly Ray. You'll have access to our contact information. But just as an overview in a nutshell, just remembering that the resume is going to be what gets you to the interview. Make sure it's professional, make sure it's concise. It has the information on there that you want to talk about in the interview that you can talk about. Make sure your name and phone number and email address are accurate. And again, having multiple people look at your resume and having it be a work in progress. You're going to add things, you're going to delete things, you're going to change it around. So it is definitely a working document. But I have no doubt that if you take some of these tips, then you will have a fantastic resume that you're proud to show off, and that you'll land your next hopefully interview and job or internship.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for taking time to sit down with us and just go through this information. It's so valuable and timeless. It really is timeless information. So whether you're an alumni listening to this or a student, I think your resume is going to be spot on now because of the information shared. So thank you so much. Don't forget to visit us at enactusunitedstates.org, career services, and find out more information about upcoming events and our job board. So other than that, thank you very much and have a great day, everybody.
Take care. Stay safe.
Yep.